Because remember, you're the one who manages your time, not the client. If your client is the one managing your time, we have a bigger problem because that means you're not in leadership. You're in servitude. And we are in service, but a part of being in service is about zooming out on the larger context of all of your responsibilities and all of the things that you want to be doing and actually assigning levels of urgency to different things and directing people to where they can get answers. Welcome to the Worth It podcast. I'm Megan Taylor, coach for the brilliant minds and the rare ones who are always growing. I have helped ambitious women and men, business owners and leaders from around the world with defining and expanding their unique work, having the relationship that they actually want, and creating the life that makes all of the work feel worth it. Every week on the podcast, we discuss the key pivots that I coach my clients on and the real work required in order to be a leader and the woman or the man that you're here to be. With that, let's get started. Good morning. Today's podcast episode is all about time management when everybody wants something from you. If you are somebody who has a generous heart, who also is super hardworking, you might find a lot of tasks piling on top of you when it comes to your work. Whether you are somebody who works in a corporate environment, if you're an executive or a leader, or managing a team or have some sort of a leadership role, or you are a business owner, you have clients and your clients have a lot of requests from you, you're going to want to have awareness of these different levels of cultural, company, and personal context when it comes to privacy, time management, and also the ways that this competes with your desires for being connected to people. And you're really wanting to get back to doing more of the work that you really love. So this is really common for anybody who is super ambitious, high achiever, who has a lot of responsibility, and who also has a big heart. And you want to be there for people, but also you want to focus on the things that you love doing. And also, you're really here to also continue to progress in your career, make a bigger impact, develop your own work, develop your own contributions. And that means actually reserving time for yourself within your work to be able to develop things. Because if you're always, answering other people's questions and frankly doing their work for them, you just end up getting buried. And then there's not enough work to actually work on the business because you're always in the business responding to other people and taking care of them. If you find that you're also tending to do this in your home life in terms of, answering people's questions and taking care of things and not feeling kind of fully supported, this is actually a personal problem. This is a pattern, and I'm going to help you understand a little bit more about where this comes from and what to really look at. And it's interesting because this problem actually comes in multiple layers. There's a cultural context, there is a company culture, and then there is also just your personal boundaries and your personal privacy and how you're leading yourself. And so I want to unpack this for you so that you can see it with clearer eyes. So this conversation was inspired by a coaching session that I did yesterday with a client who works in corporate. But she said, Megan, I'm feeling just so buried in the details of answering other people's questions on a day-to-day basis that I don't get to do the work that I really love. I don't have time and I don't know how to get the time, because there's only so many hours in the day. And I see a lot of people who are really successful. They just work really late hours, but I don't really want to do that because I also want to do these other things. She loves to dance. She wants a family most likely one day. And so she wants to practice these boundaries now to be able to make room for not just her work ambitions, but also for her personal life. And I celebrate this. There's nothing wrong with working hard, but here's the thing. When you're doing the work that you really love to do, you don't have issue with working long hours some days because it makes you feel fueled and fulfilled. But when you're getting buried in tasks and doing, frankly, other people's work for them, that is no bueno. That is no good. I don't know if you've heard, but we've been speaking Spanish a lot more in this house. I've been brushing up on my Espanol. So maybe you'll hear me bringing in Spanish more often to the podcast soon. Okay, so here I want to break this down for you so that you can understand a bit more about where this comes from, so that you can get unburied and be the person who is in charge of your own time. So I'm going to start by asking you this. Who is in charge of your time? Who's in charge of your time? Is it your clients? Is it your team members? Is it your employer? Is it your husband? Is it your kids? No, it's you. You're in charge of your own time, right? I lose track of this sometimes personally because you feel like you just got to handle whatever's tossed at you. But real leaders, they remember that they're the ones in charge of their time. You're the one who's in charge of deciding the priorities in your life and what happens when. And that's for the highest good of everybody. I want to do this breakdown for you about the cultural, the company, and the individual, and the way that you want to take a look at how these things are showing up to influence how you're managing your time. So, first of all, the cultural. So, I come from this background in international studies, and I've been fascinated by different cultures for a long time. I've actually done a lot of travel. I've been to over 30 countries, and I've lived with a number of different families in Cuba, in Nicaragua, in France, and in Costa Rica, also in Brazil. And I've learned a lot from living with families and experiencing what it's like to live and work in a different culture. Now, Latin culture, including Latin rooted cultures like France, I'm most familiar with Latin America and French culture, are considered what's called a high context society, as compared to a place like the United States, which is a more low context society. In a high context society, there's multiple points of reference because of proximity and closeness. Russia is also a high context society where there's an understanding that happens very quickly with more nuance and more subtle cues, including, cultural contexts of people being more aware of what's going on in each other's lives because there's actually less privacy in these cultures compared to the United States. And so what that means from a communication standpoint is that not as much needs to be communicated and there's more just kind of understanding and not as much concise communication. Whereas in the United States, what we find is that there's more concise communication, more like summarized wrap ups, like an introduction to the conversation that's going to be had. Here's what I'm going to tell you. Here's what I'm telling you. And here's the summary to make sure that everybody's truly on the same page. Whereas in a high context, it's more likely for people to have more assumptions and also to work in a style that considers less the individual and more kind of the common and the cultural. What this looks like in a practical standpoint, I'll just give you an example. When I was living in Nicaragua with my host family, there's a cultural context there around time management that I actually found to be really beautiful and really attractive, where you have, first of all, because of resource constraints, it's more likely that you have multiple families, like multi generations living under one house. So you'll have the grandparents, you will have the parents, and you will have the grandchildren living all in one household. And everybody will have breakfast together. Then everybody goes to work or goes to school. Then they come home for lunch. Then they go back out and then they come home for dinner. There's kind of this built-in time management rhythm that is cultural. It's a cultural context, right? It's not something that needs to be communicated because there's just a rhythm and a respect as well around differentiating like work-life balance, essentially. Additionally, what you find is that, in places where it's more crowded or there are less resources, there's also less privacy and there's more interdependency and more sharing. It's funny, I remember this moment when my host brother Moy said, "Hey, do you want to watch a movie tonight? We can totally borrow the DVD player down the street." And there's one DVD player for the entire neighborhood, and it's totally understood and expected that you can just go over unannounced. You don't text anybody and give them a heads up. You just go over and you borrow the DVD player and then you bring it back, kind of like checking it out at the library. You share resources in these types of communities where resources are lower. I actually found to be really attractive. I've done a lot of travel in Latin America because for me, it felt more connected. And those were things that I was really craving was like, I like the feeling of warmth and family and sharing and like being there for each other and all that. But I also really value how we do it in the United States too. The independence, the freedom of speech, the ability to, to say what you really mean. Also the ability to operate more independently and achieve more and succeed. But granted, a lot of that, unless you ask for support or you hire support, you're ending up doing that more on your own than the way that they do it in a place like in Latin America where there's more ready support and people kind of lean in to offer what they have as opposed to needing to ask for it. So it's important to understand, like, are you in a high context or a more low context society? And that also means the types of clients and the cultures of those people that you're working with. And what is their assumption? Do they need more deliberate communication or is there more nuance and understanding? That's kind of step number one is, looking at that part. Hi. So I don't know if you've heard, but I've decided to do something a little different. I'm opening up spots on my calendar for you if you are interested in working with me. This is for you if you are a high achiever, an executive, a business owner, a six figure plus CEO, and you're ready to move beyond the success that you've already created, beyond the money, and into the life and the work that you don't need a vacation from. So, this is how it works. This is 45 minutes complimentary to you, where we get on a call together. You come on the call and you share how you're honestly feeling about your life and your work right now. I'll tell you what I think about you, what I see is ready to be shifted, and we'll talk about the real work that you're being invited into so that you can actually make happen what it is that you want. Then we'll talk about different options for working together if you'd like to continue to be supported long term, and we can go from there. So if you're feeling the pull towards this, your next step is to reach out to me on Instagram at Megan W. Taylor. Send me the word beyond via DM, and I will get you a spot on my calendar. But then from there, we want to look at what is the company culture. So, there is a movement around companies that are more about work life balance. And whether you're a business owner or you work for a business, like maybe you're a leader inside a corporate company, is many of my clients are in some sort of a leadership or an executive level role inside the company, or they're working towards that. There are some companies who are moving towards more work life balance, but there are some companies that really don't. And it's really hyper focused on productivity. And you need to recognize like what is the culture and is the culture at the company and is the structure and the processes and the policies, are they set up in a way that supports you in being able to have life balance, but also to be able to do the work that you really love doing. So as an example, with my client yesterday, she was saying, Megan, it's really hard because like I want to work on these projects that I've been really wanting to do. But the expectation is like one of the cultural values within the company that she works for is you need to unburden others, which means you need to reduce friction at the company by helping answer other people's questions so that they can get their work done. But what that creates is an environment of dependency where people are spending all day answering each other's questions and not able to really focus on getting their tasks done. And so it sounds good on paper, but when I asked her, I said, well, "What's the expectation on the turnaround time on answering these questions?" And she said, "There is none." I said, "Well, that's your problem. There's a gap in process. There is no expectation or understanding of how do you even measure whether you're doing a good job. This is actually a company limitation." And I see this really commonly in business owners as well, where if you're feeling really buried in questions from your clients, a part of that is probably because there needs to be a better communicated structure, process, or policy to help them understand how to the answers to their questions in a more efficient way that is not always about you responding right away. As an example, I have policies in place for myself as a coach where it's like, I have a 24-hour turnaround time on responding to questions, which is actually a lot quicker than most coaches do. And actually, I usually respond the same day, but it gives me a little bit of buffer so that, I have time to do things like record podcast episodes or be able to pause in the middle of the day and have an important conversation with my man. When when baby's going to be here, being able to attend to certain things with bebe. And so I have to think about creating room for me when it's naturally designed that people are going to want a lot of my time. So you need to be thinking about that for you, which leads me to the individual. So we talked about the cultural context, the company context of, are there right processes and policies in place to make sure that you have the time and space to also do the work that is on the business and not just in the business, working on these core projects that are going to move the needle forward for your career growth and not just like, frankly, doing other people's work for them, but to look at you as the individual and what works for you. So you want to look at yourself in terms of your own values. What is the price that you put on actually working on the work that you want to do and getting these projects done that really matter to you? What does it cost when you continue to prioritize meeting other people's needs before your own? And that's really like the deep inner work of looking at where that pattern comes from. If you tend to be somebody who prioritizes making other people happy or solving other people's problems or even getting, accolades for being the most helpful person in the room, that can like scratch a certain kind of itch. It's kind of like, it feels good. It feels good to be good. It feels good to be wanted. It feels good to be useful. However, what are you currently avoiding that's actually really important to you because you're actually deprioritizing yourself? So, whether it's really deep diving and understanding your next contribution through your work, I don't know, you want to write a book, you want to launch a podcast, you want to create this new proposal at work, you want to design something, you need to build a funnel for your business, like these different projects that are really important to you that you keep putting off because I don't know, maybe it seems a little bit more ambiguous and like sometimes it's easier to just like respond and solve like a quick problem rather than tackle like a bigger, gnarlier, more ambiguous one. That's a part of why people work with me is we can sit and we can unpack how are you going to tackle that project? How can we make it more bite-sized? How can we structure and fit it into your coming week? What boundaries do you need to set when it comes to yourself in terms of managing your time? Because remember, you're the one who manages your time, not the client. If your client is the one managing your time, we have a bigger problem because that means you're not in leadership. You're in servitude. And we are in service, but a part of being in service is about zooming out on the larger context of all of your responsibilities and all of the things that you want to be doing and actually assigning levels of urgency to different things and directing people to where they can get answers. It's like when you're training your clients that you're the one who always has the answers, they're going to keep coming to you. It's kind of like how a mother, it's like a mother with her kids. It's like the kids need to learn independence. The kids need to learn how to mess up. The kids need to learn how to become skilled in different areas, and we can't do it all for them. And so if they keep coming back to you and they're like, "Mommy, like show me how to, like can you show me how?" You can show them how, but they also need space to be able to try on their own and also to be able to go to other resources as well to find the answers. And, when I'm talking about other resources, I'm really more talking about your clients and your team members. If they are always needing to come to you to find the answers, that's creating a dependency. The better thing to do is to do things like create self-serve resources where they can go find the answers themselves. Or it's like give them a structure and say, hey, go try this and then come back and tell me how it went, and give them a chance to develop that skill set on their own so that they're not dependent. This is really about empowering the people around you rather than doing it for them. Think about how many times you are doing things for people that are really their responsibility because it's their lesson to learn, especially for adults, not, kids are kids, but especially for adults. How often are you caretaking other people because at some level it feels good for you to do that and to feel useful and to make a contribution. But when you're doing that at the sacrifice of yourself and being able to really progress your career and focus on what matters to you, that's actually a disservice to the people around you, which is kind of funny. It's kind of ironic because actually the way that you be of highest service in the world is to make yourself a little bit less available at times so that you can become fully resourced through the things that put gas in your tank. So this is doing the work that you actually love, continuing to grow and develop yourself, making sure you're taking time to eat lunch, making sure you're taking some evenings off to be able to be with your partner, to be able to go to the gym, to be able to take care of yourself, to refuel your energy. Then when you show up to be there for your clients or to be there for your team, you're able to really give your highest. And that's for the highest good of everybody. We can't give from an empty cup. And it really comes down to you staying fully resourced and fully juicy so that the conversations that you're having are really productive and you're able to come in as a leader and be able to really stay in control of your time. So if you remember anything from today's episode, it is who is in charge of your time? It's you. And to remember as well, based on the cultural context, the company context, and the company culture, as well as your individual background of your values of how do you balance caring for others and caring for yourself. These are things to all be looking at. And so if you're like, Megan, this is all really resonating, and I wish that I could just get your eyes on my situation to understand how do I get unburied from so many tasks and start getting more time on the calendar for doing the work that I really love and just falling back in love with my work again, because I've just been feeling really overwhelmed by how much people need from me. I would love to help you with that. So I'm still offering these free calls, the Beyond Success calls. You can get time on my calendar. The best way to do that is there's a link in the show notes, or you can reach out to me on Instagram. I don't know how long these calls are going to be available for free. I'm doing them right now. So if you feel interested in working with me and having a conversation and really pinpointing the shifts that you're being called to make in your life and in your work, definitely reach out as soon as possible and we'll find a spot for you on my calendar, okay? All right. Thank you so much, and I'll see you on the next episode. Hi, lovely. Really quick before you go, it would mean the absolute world to me if you found value in today's episode, if you would take a minute to leave a 5-star review for the podcast. This is going to help other powerhouses like you to be able to find it. Also, I love interacting with my listeners, so I would love to know more about what you thought about today's episode. If you take a screenshot and share it to your Instagram stories and tag @Megan W. Taylor, it's going to notify me, and I actually love to reshare your posts with my audience as well. With that, thank you so much for being a listener, and I'm wishing you a beautiful, productive, happy, sexy, lucrative week, and I will see you on the next episode.